Hello, Cool9 here with another Topic of the Week video. This week I'll be again discussing Avatar: The Last Airbender and Star Wars, but with a twist. This week's topic was submitted by GalloChip19, Tumblr user GalloChip19, and their topic is, I would like to hear your opinions and comparisons between Star Wars and Avatar: The Last Airbender when it comes to creative control. The original Star Wars trilogy is great, Avatar: The Last Airbender is great, but the sequels/prequels were rubbish. Why were they rubbish? To me, the creators seem to have had more creative control in the sequels/prequels while the rest of the crew had less. What do you think? Now, I will start off by saying, I like the prequels. I don't think they're that bad. They certainly have their flaws, don't get me wrong, but they really aren't that bad, and most of the hate comes from bandwagons than actual legit criticisms. But with that aside, yes, Bryke and Lucas did have more creative control themselves over, their projects than the past. That is true. But I think we should draw a contrast here rather than a comparison, because I think that's a big deal. Lucas, for the faults he has had in the past, is very, very creative. He can come up with a really great story, great characters, great worlds. Just look at the prequels. All the cool settings, the different planets, Naboo, Geonosis. Even the briefest glimpse we see of Alderaan. He's a creative guy. And he can clearly come up with something. And when you really start analyzing the story elements of the prequels, you can actually see that, especially connecting to the original trilogy, there's a lot of meaning and a lot of stuff that Lucas put in. He's clearly not an idiot, and he didn't do any stuff just out of ego. He actually was legitimately telling a story. However, when you get to Bryke, they again did have complete control over Legend of Korra. And then they ran it into the ground. I've talked about this quite a lot on my channel. Here's the thing with them. Bryke are not writers, really. They can write, but they're more idea guys. They're the guys who come in with this really cool idea, but you better have 20 people watching them at every second of the day, or else they're going to do something immensely horrible. If you want, I know a lot of people like to hold Lucas as the worst thing ever. It's exaggeration and hyperbole, but let's look at the prequels. Is there anything in the prequels that's as bad as Legend of Korra? I don't think so. Even the worst part about it was the romantic dialogue. That, I agree, was pretty jilted and really awkward. And even some other lines. And what Lucas needed was someone to help rewrite the dialogue and more freedom to the actors to say things they thought sounded better. But if the dialogue was better and more tightly written, then I think a lot of people have significantly less issues with the prequels. But if you look at Legend of Korra, everything that's an issue with Legend of Korra is an absolute structural issue. Everything about it. The characters are poorly set up. The characters are not developed. They just kind of get thrown into different situations and never really change unless the plot demands you need to change right now. Plots just literally just flop out of nowhere. Have absolutely no relevance to anything, and it's a mess. You have the actual stories of the prequels, if anyone wants to, actually think about it. The stories are actually pretty good. And you actually have a series of events, logical events, and build up and tension and stuff, all that going on within each story of the prequels. But then Legend of Korra is an absolute mess with no thought or cohesiveness at all to it. So I can't really compare them and say that Lucas is like Bryke, because no, Lucas is so much better than Bryke. On top of that, Lucas did learn his lesson. When he was doing the Clone Wars TV show, he brought in a team of writers and oversaw it. So he was like, okay, I'm going to tell you, stuff I want to do. You guys write this and come up with all these story ideas. I'll oversee it and have final approval. And that worked great for 4 seasons. A few mishaps. It wasn't perfect, but for the first 4 seasons, it was pretty good. And you can tell that Lucas's involvement in a Star Wars product doesn't prove it. Because the man is the guy who created Star Wars. It's Lucas's own unique je ne sais quoi. I really can't put my finger on it. He just has this weird artistic ability. His own sensibilities just make it feel like Star Wars. Now, let's compare that to the main Star Wars product that didn't have his involvement. The Force Awakens. That I have actually been calling The Legend of Korra for Star Wars for quite some time. And I think this is one of the biggest distinctions you can draw. When you take Lucas out of Star Wars, and you don't have people who love Star Wars just as much, you're going to end up with crap. Take a look at Rogue One. Rogue One didn't have Lucas involved, but the guy behind it, Gareth Edwards, did a good job. The movie is fantastic. He cared, and he cared what Lucas thought. He wanted Lucas to like it. And thus he produced a good movie because he wanted to make it. The Force Awakens, not so much, because J.J. Abrams didn't care what people thought. He didn't care what Lucas thought. It was just a moneymaker. That's really all it was. And you can tell that the Force, alright, let's look. The Force Awakens and Legend of Korra are both sequels to beloved classics that take place decades later. And both of them have the opposite thing. Legend of Korra has 100% ironclad control by Brian and Mike. The Force Awakens has Lucas completely cut out, and all of the ideas he had suggested to Disney initially with the scripts, thrown in the garbage. So Lucas had no involvement in that. And it turned into a steaming pile of garbage that, is actually worse than Legend of Korra. If you ask me, at least Legend of Korra had more to enjoy about it. No, maybe. I think they're about equal footing, because they both did have things I liked. But they both take characters that we loved from the original series, ruined them for the sake of propping up new characters. You had Luke, Han, and Leia all ruined. Han was actually killed off just to prop up Kylo Ren's personal story, his own character arc. In Avatar Last Year, in Legend of Korra, you had the gang turn into absolutely horrendously awful parents and probably absolutely lower than dirt people. Aang was neglectful, demanding, cruel to his own son. He demanded that Tenzin go into the spirit world or else. He demanded that he do that, and he put so much pressure on it. Tenzin, into his 50s, feels inadequate because he couldn't go into the spirit world. First off, besides the fact that Aang would never do this, going into the spirit world is only remotely easy for the Avatar because they're the bridge between the spirit world and the human world. For the average person, even if they're the son of the Avatar, that's a monumental task. One of the only people who's ever done it is Iroh. And that was supposed to show just how in tune spiritually he is. It's not just something that you just do. And then you have Katara turned into a sad old lady who does nothing and doesn't care about her people. She didn't care about her children enough to tell her husband to not stop being a douchebag. And it's like, whoa, wait, what? You mean the fiery and absolutely fierce with passion Katara? What? Oh, and Toph sleeps around. And basically pits her kids against each other, shows extreme favoritism towards someone who's a horrible person. And just, wait, what? You're telling me that after her horrible parents, she would basically sleep around, make it almost impossible for her kids to know who the father is, and basically give them the most unstable life possible? Oh, yeah. She would totally do it. These people would totally do that. Just like Zuko would go out of his way to start another war, and oh wait, I forgot, that happened in The Promise. Thanks, Bryke. All the problems of Legend of Korra stem from the fact that Bryke were in control. And I actually think, okay, this is actually a good point to make that I just thought of. The actual creative force behind the original trilogy of Star Wars movies and, the Avatar: The Last Airbender were different from each other. Lucas is a head creative force throughout all 6 Star Wars movies. It's just, he was the creative force. If he was involved in it, he was a heavy creative force. Even if he wasn't directing it, he was still a heavy creative force. It's not like, I've seen a lot of people act like after the first movie, he literally did nothing. Like, he literally did nothing at all. And that it was everyone else who did all the work, and he just sat there doing nothing. No, that's not what Lucas does. He gets into it. He's involved in it. That's just him. It's his baby. It's what he created. He's always in part, even if he's not technically in charge of the movie by directing it, he's still involved with it. So, and you can tell them that Lucas was the main creative driving force, and you're going to see that in The Force Awakens, it outright lacks that creative drive. It's one of the many reasons it feels so utterly repetitive and boring. Is because it doesn't have that creative drive that Lucas brings to to his movies. Compare that to Avatar: The Last Airbender. Remember how I said that Bryke were idea guys? Well, that's what they were. They came up with Avatar: The Last Airbender, there's no doubt about that, and no one can deny that. However, they weren't even in charge creatively. That's Aaron Haas. He was head writer, along with the many writers for Avatar: The Last Airbender. Bryke were just contributors to that. Sure, yeah, they were show creators. They came up with it, and they were involved with stuff that was going on, but they weren't in charge. And that's an important detail. They contributed, but ultimately a lot of their ideas ended up getting tossed into, ended up on the cutting room floor because they were bad ideas. They wanted to have Toph be a guy, and I believe it was Aaron Haas. Don't quote me on that, but I believe it was Aaron Haas. It was someone else that suggested that Toph be a girl. And they ended up rolling with it. And guess what? Toph ended up becoming one of the most popular characters in the show. And originally, what Bryke had is that Toph was going to be a guy, and there was going to be a pervasive love triangle between Toph, Katara, and Aang throughout all of Book 2. Yeah, that's basically what happened in Legend of Korra, because that's what they want. Meanwhile, you have George Lucas. When George Lucas wanted his romantic subplot, it was a consistent romantic subplot between Anakin and Padme. And it actually had development. And it actually worked. Despite the fact that it had some horrendous romantic dialogue. Like, there's some that's just, it's painful for even me. But as I've discussed these in my previous video, this doesn't destroy the movie. So when you're looking at these two series, you can't just simply say that, yeah, they're basically the same, because they're not. And a lot of the details are extremely different. When you have something like when you're looking at the sequel series. Oh yeah, also one thing I wanted to point out forgot to mention before. The prequels are prequels. They come before the original trilogy. They don't affect the outcome of that. Legend of Korra and The Force Awakens both affect the outcome of their original series and the future of the characters that we grew up knowing and loving. And it ruins all of that. It takes what the characters that we cared about and does horrible things to them for the sake of contriving a new plot. Aang became a negligent father who didn't care about most of his children because he played blatant favoritism, just so that Tien, Kia, and Bumi could have a subplot. That's it. Yeah, and so that Lin could have a subplot, they basically ruined Toph's character. Not basically, they did ruin Toph's character. And gave her an out-of-nowhere half-sister just so that she could have a subplot. And out of The Force Awakens, Han and Leia's entire relationship is destroyed, saying that they never really loved each other that much. It was all really rocky. And, after Return of the Jedi, it was just a really, unstable relationship. And it was so bad it caused their child to turn to the dark side. All for the sake of Kylo Ren and Han Solo having a subplot. Starting to see some common themes here. This is one of the reasons why I didn't like The Force Awakens, is aside from the fact that it completely destroyed everything the original trilogy did, rendering the entirety of the original trilogy, which I grew up on as a child, utterly pointless. And while Legend of Korra doesn't do that completely, it does still take characters that we knew and loved from Avatar: Last Airbender and says, yeah, you know what? They're pretty crappy people too. They're no better than the people that they never liked or fought against. Makes sense. It's like, hey, did you love something? Yeah, let's just kill it. Look, we have something new. Look, Korra is such a great avatar. Look, Aang is just such an idiot who got upset that his pet was stolen. Which is actually said by Bryke. Yeah, just forget that Appa is basically the only thing he has left of his old life as an air nomad, and that the rest of his people were genocided. Yeah, naturally, he's upset that Appa was taken by the Sandbenders. It's not just him being mad that they took his pet. Gosh dang it. Stop trying to make Korra look good. And this is the problem. In terms of creative control, you can see that there's a difference between a creator who cares. George Lucas cares. Despite what people think, George Lucas cares. He wants to do good, even if he's not perfect. Even if he takes a risk that doesn't pay off, he cares. Then you have Bryke. Bryke do not care. They want the money. They haven't been able to do anything since Avatar: Last Airbender. Nothing. They have no notoriety for anything else. So, like J.K. Rowling, they go back to the one thing that they had, and they're going to squeeze as much money out of that as possible. That's why you see all these comics, all this stuff. They're going to try to do as much to squeeze money out of the Avatar brand as much as they can, because that's all they have. They don't care. They'll crap out 20 comics. Doesn't matter if these comics step on the continuity or ruin the characters. Who cares that the Promise completely regressed Zuko back to more or less his, not quite book 1, but he was pretty darn close, regressing on a lot of his character development through books 2 and 3, just for the sake of having a subplot. And that's, or really a main plot truly of that, but it's ultimately pointless. And that's the difference. That's the big difference here. Someone who cares and someone who doesn't care. And Bryke don't care. When they made Legend of Korra, they weren't trying to make something good. Well, they thought they were. They thought they were making something good, and they expected you to love it no matter what. And they would insult you for daring to criticize them at all, especially if you criticized Mako. That's another thing, is how they reacted to the criticism, because what did George Lucas do? George Lucas listened. If you watch the prequels and you look at how much presence Jar Jar Binks has in the prequel trilogy, he's a significant supporting character and plot-relevant character in The Phantom Menace. He's a minor character in Attack of the Clones, and by the time of Revenge of the Sith, he has a cameo. So clearly he was listening, and he listened when it came to the Clone Wars TV show, hiring a bunch of writers and overseeing it as the creative lead. He listened. Bryke haven't at all. Bryke haven't listened. Bryke haven't learned, because Bryke don't want to admit that they screwed up. The rest of the crews they had were important for both Avatar: The Last Airbender and the original trilogy. But the difference is who made them great. The original trilogy, Lucas made it great. He just had the support of a bunch of people, and they made classic movies. When you look at Avatar: The Last Airbender, it was the team and Aaron Has that made Avatar: The Last Airbender great, not Mike. If Mike had complete creative control of the beginning, I doubt Avatar: The Last Airbender would have made it past 1, maybe 2 seasons. If George Lucas was working as the director, writer, producer, all that stuff for the original trilogy, would it be as good as it is? No, probably not. There are some things that were affected by other people, and a lot of times even just having someone have a second pair of eyes to look at it, because as a creator, you can sometimes get sort of lost in your own vision and not quite see things clearly, but it's always good to have a second pair of eyes. But comparing to their work, basically Solo, where George Lucas had such creative control over the prequels compared to Brian and Mike's Legend of Korra in the comics, that you can see where having the heart and having the actual creativity really puts the prequels way ahead of Legend of Korra. And I think I've talked about this topic. If you want to watch last week's topic video, you can check that out here. If you want to watch next week's topic video, you can check it out here when I get that done. So if you want to submit a topic, if you're on Tumblr, you can just send me an ask and do topic : then whatever topic you want me to talk about. Or if you're on YouTube, you can just simply comment below. Just make sure that you follow the rules that I'll be posting down on both Tumblr and YouTube. And if you don't know if I know anything about it, just ask, or just send me a topic, and I'll probably end up doing a table talk on it. And yeah, that's it. Thank you for watching.